Hi folks, and welcome to Tiny Kitchen. We're pretty sure this is the smallest space to ever be featured in a cooking show. If we can cook it here, you can cook it anywhere. Did you catch the riddle on our Tiny Kitchen Facebook page this week? You might think I'm new and chic, but I've fed pharaohs, queens, and Sikhs. I am quinoa, and together with other ancient grains, we're going to feature quinoa in today's recipe. This is a less than 15-minute prep time recipe and 20 minutes in a rice cooker that you don't even have to watch. It doesn't get any easier than this, and the results are fabulous. We're focusing on lunch today, and quinoa makes a light yet still filling and substantial lunchtime treat. And it can be eaten cold as easy as hot. So you can pack it, take it with you, and you don't even need a microwave to enjoy a fabulous lunch on the go or in your office. Let's take a look at the ingredients for today's delicious dish. The ingredients are pretty simple, aren't they? 1 medium-sized yellow onion diced, 3 cloves garlic minced, 3 teaspoons of Tiny Kitchen rice spice. We're going to talk more about this in a moment. 1.5 cups of ancient grains mix. Now you can buy this already mixed or you can mix it yourself. We've used 2 parts quinoa, 1 part amaranth, and 1 part millet. You can go with our recipe or you can try other ancient grains and shake it up even more. Or if you prefer, you can simply use straight quinoa as well. And then, of course, 1 bunch of mustard greens. There are other optional ingredients you can use as well if you choose. Curry leaf, a dried bay leaf, a Thai hot pepper, mint leaf, or as a very nice finish to go on top of the dish after it's cooked, we can chop up green onions. Just delicious. This is what we'll be cooking with. Let's get started. For our first step, we're going to want to saute our onions and garlic. And for this, I chose my seasoned wok. And it seems like when you look at wok recipes, they almost always start with add a tablespoon of oil. In a well-seasoned wok, this is simply not necessary. Just like cast iron that we've talked about in the past, it is already a non-stick surface if it's gone through a proper seasoning process. You can learn how to season a wok by going to fatfreewithme.com/blog and searching our blog for how to season a wok, or simply wok, W-O-K, and we show you how to do it. We're going to toss our onions around just for a little while to heat them up. And in this case, we're doing our onions first because they're a little bit thicker. Our garlic is minced, so it's going to heat up and caramelize really very quickly. Once the onions are heated through, we'll go ahead and add our garlic. And caramelizing onions and garlic is a very fast process. I like the wok for the reason that you can heat it up to high heat, and you can accomplish this process much faster than with other cooking surfaces. You can already see how it's starting to nicely brown. The onions are becoming a little translucent. All right, let's go ahead and get our rice cooker prepared. Using a rice cooker, and the rice cooker is what makes this recipe so incredibly easy. We're going to first add our sauteed onions and garlic. 1.5 cups of our ancient grains mix featuring quinoa. Of our 3 teaspoons of rice spice, we're going to use 2 now and 1 later. You remember how we talked about the volatiles on spices and how when you overcook a spice, some of the flavor dissipates and goes away? We're going to use 2 teaspoons of our rice spice now and cook it with the rice. That will give us a nice bed of base flavors, and we'll save the 3rd teaspoon to use when our dish is nearly complete, so that the volatiles come into play and we get that really bright, crisp taste. Of the optional ingredients, I'm going to use a mint leaf in this recipe. I really like the finish that it gives us. And then we're going to add our water. In this case, we want 2.5 cups of water to go with our 1.5 cups of ancient grains. Be sure to read the package on what you buy to get the correct amount of water. And then we're just going to mix it a slight amount to make sure that we get the spice all the way through our quinoa. Scrape the quinoa off the sides of the bowls, keep it into the water. And now we're going to close the lid, set our rice cooker, and come back in 20 minutes. While our quinoa is cooking, we're going to prepare our mustard. Our mustard does not cook with the quinoa. We're going to put this in near the end so we preserve the pungent, fresh flavor of our mustard green. We're going to use a food processor and pulse our mustard. I'm going to show you a neat trick if you haven't seen this before. When you're processing greens, directions always say cut out the thick stem. They're referring to this part on the center of the leaf that's thick and fibrous and kind of hard to chew. There's absolutely no reason to cut it out because the thick stem will take care of itself. If you fold your leaf in half, grab your leaf firmly, and pull, you'll see how the leaf pulls away from the thick stem. As you go up the stem, when you get to the point where the leaf becomes soft and easy to chew, the stem will break itself, and you can use the leaf and just toss it in. There's no need to go to the tedious process of breaking it out. I'll go ahead and break up all of the greens. With all of our greens packed into the bowl of our food processor, we'll put on the lid and we're going to pulse. Pulsing does a better job of pulling the greens down into the blades and making quick work of this task. Now, when you get to this part where the mustard greens are almost but not completely broken down, we're going to pause for a moment and add the last teaspoon of our rice spice. Now, I recommend you let the lid sit on for a moment before you do this. Allow about a minute. The oils from mustard greens have an effect on your eyes much like onions do, and they can cause you to cry if you take this lid off too fast. So having waited a little bit, we'll go ahead and add our last teaspoon of rice spice. Now let's talk about rice spice. Rice, quinoa, and most grains can be flavored in so many different delicious, delicious ways. And I've learned that the best way is to pair the seasonings in your grain with the seasonings in your main dish. In this case, we're adding greens. Rice spice is custom blended to work well, just juxtaposing grains with greens, to bring those flavors together and to marry them in a magnificent way. And when you get the right spice in a dish, you know it right away because the flavors come together like they're meant to be. Rice spice is a mix of turmeric, celery, Hawaiian sea salt, and a wonderful, wonderful spice called grains of paradise. It's hard to find, and you can use cracked or freshly ground black pepper instead. But we use grains of paradise in the Tiny Kitchen rice spice because it adds a certain nuttiness and a brightness and a little bit of sweetness that you don't get from ground pepper. So we're going to take and just pulse 2 or 3 more times to get the rice spice really into the greens. And then we're going to wait until our quinoa is done cooking, and I'll meet you then to add the two ingredients together. See you in just a bit. While our grains are cooking, let's take a moment to feature a kitchen appliance. We used a food processor today to pulse our mustard greens down into small pieces before we put them into our finished grains. There are 4 main things you want to look at in selecting a food processor to make sure it will meet your needs and give you years of satisfied service. The first is the base, or the motor. Make sure that the motor is powerful enough to handle any projects you might give it. Now, pulsing leafy greens doesn't take a lot of power, but if I fill this bowl with dough, well, that takes a lot of power indeed. So make sure the base will handle the projects you give it. The second is the size of the bowl. Make sure that the bowl is large enough to accommodate your projects. When you're pulsing leafy greens, I like a larger bowl. I can put an entire serving or 2 or even 3 into the bowl to pulse it, whereas with a smaller bowl, I would have to make several batches and do it a small amount at a time. However, some projects require a smaller bowl, so I selected a machine that has a smaller bowl insert. I can put this inside the larger bowl to handle the smaller projects that I might give it. The third thing that you want to be sure of is that it has the attachments that you need. This one has blades for the large bowl, the small bowl, and underneath in the bottom of the box it has slicers, dicers, graters, and any attachment that you might want for your cooking projects. And finally, look at the hopper and make sure that there's enough room to put in whatever ingredients you're going to add as you're pulsing recipes together. Again, I like this one because there are 3 levels of hoppers. I can have a small hopper for small projects, a medium-sized hopper, or a very large chute that will accommodate anything big that I might want to put into my projects, like adding more leafy greens. Make sure of these 4 elements and you'll choose a machine that will give you years of service.
Okay, the rice cooker is done. You can see how beautiful this quinoa and ancient grains mix is, but it's a little bit flat, so we're going to take a moment and just fluff it up, make it nice and airy. This will allow the moisture from the bottom of the pan to evaporate out and give us a nice, even, light, fluffy texture to our quinoa. Now we're going to take our pulsed mustard greens and we're going to mix them in. And this is going to bring in the last of our rice spice. Remember, we mixed that in at the final stages of pulsing the mustard greens, and it'll give us that extra aromatic scent and flavor to really make this dish pop. We're going to mix this in and we're not going to cook it. We're just going to allow the heat from the quinoa to give a little bit of a wilt to the mustard greens. Isn't that beautiful?
Now you might have thought that quinoa was a new and fashionable thing, but together with amaranth, millet, and other ancient grains, it's actually been feeding people for thousands of years, and it's every bit as healthful and delicious today as it was thousands of years ago when it fed pharaohs, queens, and Sikhs. That's it for today's program, folks. I hope you enjoy the recipe. If you'd like to learn more about the Fat Free With Me weight loss program, please visit us today at fatfreewithme.com. And to learn more about rice spice and the other entries in the Tiny Kitchen Spice Blend line, please send email to customercare@fatfreewithme.com and we'll be happy to get information out to you. That's it for today, folks. We'll see you next week.